Welcome to another exciting episode of the Business of Digital podcast, featuring your hosts, Matt Siltala and Dave Rohr. All right, guys, looking forward to talking about this one because security is something that is on everybody's mind, especially online, and with what's, there's just so much to talk about. But what we're going to talk about specifically today on this episode is WordPress security, basically WordPress plugin, performance, security, things like that. And so everybody give a warm welcome. We got Dave here.
Hola.
And the thing that, I'm glad that we're doing this one because the thing that I see happen a lot, Dave, is, people see different plugins or they get different plugins or they get way too many plugins and they just put them all on their website and they either don't deactivate them or they don't delete them.
They never delete them.
Yeah, they never delete them and they never get rid of them, and they don't realize how bad that messes up like the performance of their site, how it can slow it down, and not to mention just a lot of the security risks and the things that I know that you're going to talk about. I know that, I had a website that was a personal one that I just didn't really pay a lot of attention to. And it actually was taken down because of someone got a hold of one of the plugins that was on there and put in some malicious code or whatever on an automatic update. I don't even know how, but it was because I wasn't paying attention to all the different plugins that I had for WordPress. And I haven't, and even to the simple fact of, are you updating your WordPress security, every time a new update, or not the WordPress security, but are you updating to the latest versions and the core of it? That's the one thing, like, I got to shout out to Chuck Reynolds, our friend. He's always like tweeting out, hey, new update, or go secure yourselves, or this or that. If it wasn't for him, I would probably forget half the time to do that kind of stuff.
He is in WordPress deep all the time, though.
He is.
He's got plugins and stuff too,
So yeah, so anyway, those are just some of my thoughts with it. Dave, kicking off, I know that you got a lot to talk about on this subject, but I know that as far as let's just, again, we got a small SMB listening to us, or just anybody really that runs a WordPress business or blog, or, like WordPress is a part of a bigger site or whatever. Pay attention to your security updates, pay attention to your core updates, and pay attention to the plugins that you have. And that's really what Dave's going to be jumping into today for us.
Yeah, so it was an article from WordPress late last year, late in 2017, but I've heard of other stories, and I even heard about another one recently where one guy is buying old plugins. He's looking for plugins that have, 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 installs. And he goes to the developer and he finds something that's been sitting there for a year or two or three, and sometimes even older, and he's buying them.
Huh.
And then he buys them, and then he does a quick update just to see, see how many people are going to update it and, install whatever it is. And he basically uses it as a Trojan horse, and then updates, shady backlinks or shady whatever into your site. And now, with so many people doing JavaScript mining stuff and trying to inject that into ads, he could be injecting JavaScript that every time a user comes to your site, they leverage that plugin that you haven't updated is helping this guy mine for Bitcoin or something.
Yeah, so explain that to using your computer power, their computer power.
It would be using your site to install the package, install the code, and leverage your visitors on your site. So it makes it look like your site is impacting them, because it is. Because you have this plugin that you haven't used.
Interesting.
The number of times that I've seen from a performance side, the number of times I've seen people have 3 sliders installed. And most people, if you look at your website, and I know a lot of people have it, especially if you're a B2B site, you have that slider that has constantly, shuffling, and there's nowhere to click, and I hate those. But there's, all these different things going on. you tested one slider and then you got another one. You never uninstalled the other one. You never deactivated it. You now have 3 sliders installed, and all of that JavaScript, all of those CSSs are loading on every single page.
And that's got to be hurting the performance.
Yeah. And whether you know it or not, even whether it's displaying or not, you're causing an extra second or two of load, not just on that page, but on every single page of your site.
And that is a big deal with some of the more recent algorithm updates and giving preference to those that have faster sites.
Yeah. And every time you start adding more of that stuff, it just continues to slow your site down. Now, I was looking at, Business of Digital. I have Cloudflare, I have Loginizer, and a couple other security things. Like half of our stuff is, Yoast, Cache, some of the stuff just for the podcast, and then security stuff.
Right.
Like I tried to keep it as small as possible because.
So speaking of that, what would you recommend? Like, let's say someone's going to go do an audit of their WordPress plugins and whatnot.
Yep.
And let's say that I'm, mom and pop, and I go and I log in and I see all my plugins. Half of them are deactivated, or half of them I don't use. What's the proper way to go about that? Like, should I delete all that I'm not using? Should I deactivate? Am I okay just deactivating? What should we do there?
What I've done in the past when I've done audits, and I've started digging in and noticed that they've had 30 or 20 or 15 plugins. And I'm like, do you use any of these? A lot of times they're like, they were a one use, or an agency or, some designer wanted them, or someone wanted it on one section of the site, and they're not even in use right now. But they're still installed and they don't know. I typically start telling people to go, okay, in your off hours, not during, your peak business hours, go in, deactivate a plugin. What breaks? Does it impact your lead forms? Does it impact your ability to track, analytics? Does it change any of the UI or any of the ability for anything on the site to work?
Okay.
And take a look at what it's called. Maybe it's very specific and it's like, oh, okay, we had 3 sliders installed or 2 sliders installed. I turned that one off. Nothing changed on the home page. Nothing changed on this lead page. We have this other product page. Nothing changed on that. So that one we must not be using. And then what I do is go through and figure out all of the ones that are either old, or you're not using. And then I always suggest create a folder on your computer, create an email that you can save. I use Evernote. So, create a note in Evernote or whatever you need, and go and save the link to that page. So you can go and find that plugin again. So save the link so you have access to it if you need it or when you need it. Maybe there's another business unit that decides they want that slider back on. So you don't spend 5 hours trying to find it.
Right.
And trying to recreate it. You go and you can just go, okay, yeah, we deactivated it because it was, we weren't using it, but I can go right to WordPress. I have the link saved, we got it. And back those up in some fashion like that. And then delete it. That's really it.
Okay.
It's amazing. I once was helping, a business and they had a slider on there, and I was like, it was just dogging the site. And I knew when I turned it off, we actually shaved a ton of HTTP calls. We shaved like 1 meg plus from every page load because it was just on the homepage.
Crazy.
And really the goal was to get people to click on this one service they had. And that was the main thing. It was literally a slider with 1 image. And I've seen that before too, where it's literally a slider with 1 image and it really doesn't change. And I think they actually had 2, but really the goal was to get people to this one service, not the other one.
Okay.
I left the slider up. I paused it. I took a screenshot of what it was displaying, swapped out the slider, put in the screenshot that I took from the website, and told them to go look at the site. They couldn't tell that the slider was gone. And now, if you clicked anywhere on this image that I had uploaded, that was now the slider. Before, it was a slider that you couldn't actually click on.
Oh, wow.
So there was a button, but it was really small, and it would kind of move on you.
Okay.
And they've done studies that show that the UI on the sliders is horrible. Not just picking on them. But it was there, and it was actually clickable now. And they couldn't even tell that I had done it.
Wow.
But I'd shaved off all of that stuff that we didn't need. And I saved it, and I sent an email, here's the one, here's that one, here's a couple others that you had, like, one was like a duplicate post. I'm like, you're not really blogging right now, and I don't understand why you were duplicating content, maybe when they were adding services. But I go, there's another way to do it.
Yeah.
Here's the plugins that I suggest we delete. Here's a list, here's the links, just like I was saying, and, we went and deleted them.
Are there, I don't know if there are or not, and if you don't know me, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but are there any, like, tools that you can do, that you can run your WordPress site through, like for plugins or whatever, anything like that?
GoDaddy has one plugin that I've used in the past. I would highly suggest deactivating Yoast at that moment when you do it, and you're like, if you have a cache. And I've used that before.
Okay.
I haven't used it in a while. It hasn't been updated. GoDaddy, you should update that. But
I can't yell at Jim anymore because he's not there.
No, he's not. I think that was his team, but you can still probably go yell at him anyway. I've used that in the past. It wasn't great, and it really hasn't been updated now in a while. But you could also, use a GT Metrics, Google Page Insights, and do a page test of your homepage or your service page.
That's a great idea.
And GT Metrics, Pingdom have different tools, and they give you kind of waterfall of like everything that's loading. They also give you a quick summary of, it's 4 meg download, and there's 132 requests. Turn off some of these plugins that you're not using, or maybe you figure out ways around them. Go and run that test again. How much time does it save? It'll even tell you what the estimated load time is.
Okay.
And that would kind of give you a before and after without using a plugin or anything.
So what about like core updates? Because I know a lot of times in the past, like I would just be trigger happy and I would go and I would do automatic core updates right when they came out. And then all of a sudden I'd learn that everything's broke on the site. And so I would have a couple, of our programmers yell at me and say, hey, just like, let me take care of that. Let me make sure that it's, I'm the one that's doing that or whatever. And so has it gotten better? Like I haven't touched anything on those, since, for probably a couple of years, but like, what do you suggest to those listening to us that they get the core updates for security issues or whatever? Do they do them right away? Do they?
I think you're lucky because you had developers.
Yeah.
And you probably had some crazy connections and tie-ins.
Well, yeah. I mean, we are lucky because we are a 40-man shop, but that's what I'm saying. Like, what about the person that doesn't have that?
I think the best thing to do is if you use a lot of crazy APIs and have had a lot of custom stuff done, you have a developer or some sort of service that manages it.
But if they're on just a basic WordPress that hasn't been modified a lot, for the most part, going to be okay?
Yeah, I think you should be okay.
Okay.
I mean, if you're using if you have some sort of crazy Gravity form setup that does an API call and connections to your HubSpot or your Sugar CRM or Salesforce or whatever your backend system is, or even your custom backend.
Gotcha.
Or if you're an e-commerce site, and your busy time is Tuesday, perhaps don't update it Tuesday.
Good point.
Because your site might go down for a little while.
So we've been doing this a long time as far as like, we know the kind of plugins that should probably be on the sites. Obviously, there's going to be some that some people have maybe custom for specific products or things that they need. But for the most part, what would you say are like your basic necessity plugins that are secure, that are trusted and trustworthy or whatever that you would recommend everyone have on their WordPress site?
I usually use some sort of cache system. In many cases, I'll have...
We're not talking cash money, folks.
No. CACHE. It kind of saves your it saves your pages if they're not being updated really often and helps serve it quickly. Sometimes I'll use some sort of redirect. I've used a couple over in the last couple of years, but if rather than trying to get into the HTTP access file, it's just easier to do quick redirects. It's not the most optimal way. If you're in WP Engine, if you're hosted there, by the way, they're raising their rates, which is not nice. Raising them a lot. They have a limit of 1,000, and they also limit which plugins you can use.
Okay.
But they limit you, and you use their system for the redirect, so you don't need a plugin for that. The other one I typically use is Yoast SEO pretty much all the time. The only problem with Yoast SEO, and I'll probably see them later this year, and I'm going to yell at them, not that it'll matter. But dear God, they update a lot. Every time I log into any of my anytime I log into our site, literally every week I have to update it.
Oh, wow.
And sometimes even more. So I'm not sure and I know they're always updating stuff and they're fixing stuff, but oh my goodness. Yay for it being updated, but every week I'm in there and all you have to do is click a button, but still.
Yeah.
It's just, if you're an enterprise, or if you have a lot of things that could possibly break, that scares me.
Yeah.
But I still use it, and it's still a great tool. But other than that, as Kismet, if you have if you really need that or discuss, or Facebook, they have types of things. If you have comments, a lot of people don't have comments now. Maybe a security one like WordFence. There's a couple other ones. Security has one of those. Usually just to monitor it. But that's really it. And then from there, it's
more really custom. Yeah. Gotcha.
Depends on if it's e-commerce. You might have some stuff for our podcasting site. We have some ones that are specific for podcasting stuff.
And then obviously just making sure, like you were talking about with Yoast, even though it might be annoying, just make sure that you are going in and updating them.
At least once a month.
Especially if someone releases one saying, hey, this is a security fix for something that we found, because that means that someone could exploit it and essentially infect your website and any of your visitors and people that are on it.
Yeah, and the most time-consuming, expensive, pain-in-the-butt thing, and we can actually have my wife on and talk about that, because she's cleaned up a lot of sites. She's worked a couple places where they had problems because old installs weren't getting updated. And if you work at a company that has a marketing team that loves to fire off campaign type domains and then just leave them sitting there, and they're all on the same server, or they all have the same logins, if they can get into one of them, they can get into all of them.
Yeah, that's scary.
Keep track of those, make sure that they're updated, or kill them off and redirect them.
Cool.
Because cleaning that up, we can have Carolyn on sometime. You play whack-a-mole, because you can find the code and take it out, but if you don't find the root that sometimes is hidden as a file that looks like a WordPress file, or it replaces a WordPress file and kind of installs itself on it, it'll keep coming back every week, every day.
Yeah.
And the amount of time you can spend playing whack-a-mole and trying to find it is ridiculous. I mean, if you thought you were going to have some free time in your evenings, or, get anything done that week, for that campaign or for, whatever you're working on, good luck, because you're going to have people calling up and saying, I just had ads, I just had links on your homepage for Viagra, or Louis Vuitton bags or handbags or jerseys is the other spam junk. You're just going to get a ton of junk and waste a ton of time.
All right. Well, hopefully you guys have gotten some good points for WordPress security and plugins and how to go about that. And so, again, just a reminder, anything that we've talked about, we usually put it on the episode post. And so you'll be able to find references to anything that Dave or I talked about there. And so for Dave Rohr with Northside Metrics, I am Matt Siltel with Avalanche Media. Thank you guys for joining us on this episode, and we will hit you on the next one. Bye, guys.